What's going on, everyone? So, just wanted to quickly go over where we see the market kind of heading right now, just based off of the stats of last year, because I say this all the time, but that's actually the best precedent or the best reference point we have for what's happening with the economy this year, because the shift that happened last year between the summer to the winter is very similar to what's happening now, where we saw some rate hikes happen, and then we entered that typical seasonality of like fall to winter slowdown, and the prices got to the all-time lows for those couple of years, and then I think we're going to see that happen again. So if you look at the numbers here, if you look at the second half, this is when rates drastically changed, and it was very unexpected. And we saw like major drops in pricing, right? This is pretty much all the sales in Hamilton that are happening on a residential level. So it includes condos, everything. So if you look at the number of days it took to sell, right? Days to sell average, sales price, we're in 2022. So this is the peak of the market, very quick sales, and over $1 million for a property, which is like unbelievable because most people can't afford that in Hamilton. And then we saw the drastic drops in prices, right? April to May, July to August. This is when they started doing like the full 1%, like and 0.75 rate hikes. And then this is when things were really quiet. And you can see the number of days that took to sell in December and January, 37, 35. So we went from like honestly seeing properties sell in 10 days to it would be taking over a month. There was a lot of listings sitting for 60, 90 days plus. People got really good deals because it turned out in the beginning of 2023, things started picking up again because they announced they're pausing rates. So obviously there's people that wanted to move. People have to buy and sell homes. People have to move for work, other stuff, right? It's not like it's just investors or people buying multiple properties that are doing transactions. So we saw things start picking up again, but it wasn't that crazy. And then you see the number of days to sell dropped again. So 23 days, 20 days. And this was kind of like the sweet spot where people were getting pretty good money for their properties. And we saw like, it's interesting to see these numbers because it doesn't look like there was a crazy change. This is like a 5% change from December of 2022 to April of 2023. But there's some cases where people got really like a lot of money for their properties. Like I was shocked. But then we see the slowdown effect in June and July. So now the issue is like, no one knows what happens beyond this, right? Because there actually is no real reference point. This has never happened in the last 30 years. So you can't go back to the 90s or 80s because remember, it's a different economy, different incomes, different population size. There's just a different overall, like, I would say even like debt wise, like people had much less debt compared to now. And the incomes were pretty like sufficient relative to the times back then versus they are now. So we don't actually have a reference point for what's happening now to compare it to. The only reference point we have is second half of 2022, the changes that happened to second half of 2023, because we see interest rate hikes, economy, like at this point, I don't know if anyone remembers, it was like, I remember speaking with agents, I remember seeing the news. So everywhere you would go, it was so bad that people thought like the whole world was like going to burn, like it was bad. So it's starting to feel like that again. But I think right now, it's surprising, like people are a little bit more calm because it feels like we're just going to be in this up, down, up, down, up, down kind of economy, which is fine. That's what we probably need because I think either thing is bad, right? So this is our reference point. So I think personally that because of what I'm seeing on the ground level, like live data, which I'll show you some sales in a second too, we're seeing even this September number coming down now, right? So we're seeing this come down by like another, like probably like 30, 40, another 5%, let's say, right? Just based on even sales of specific properties. Like I'll give you examples like condos, for example, and even like the typical detached bungalow in Hamilton, which is a very common type of house in the suburbs of Hamilton, they're selling for like, in a lot of cases, like 30, 40, 50,000 less than they should be, right? Or than they were in May, June. So I think we're going to see the number of days to sell pick up, and we're going to see the prices come down again. So if you're selling a property, basically, just you probably don't want to list it in November or December, I would say, um, because unless you have like an amazing property that, like, if you're flipping or something, and you can get a better price than all your competition, because people still pay good money for good value, right? That basic principle is there, but still, for the most part, I think it's going to be challenging. Like, you'll be able to sell, but it'll be like this: your property's going to be sitting for a while. You're probably going to get less than you thought you were going to get in the summer. And then if you're buying, this is honestly where we got some of the best deals. Like these, I would say between November to like February is like that sweet spot where you can pick up really solid deals, but that's not to say that like the economy will pick up. You can't bank on that, right? Like, that's the issue. Like, people were not expecting March and April of this year things to pick up like 5 to 10%. Like, that was very, I would say that was a surprise. So I don't think we should have any expectation of things like picking up in the near future, meaning like the next 6 months. Um, the only thing I think that will cause a real drastic change, whether it's up or down, in terms of like the average sales price, the number of days to sell a property, is if we see, for whatever reason, inflation goes crazy and the Bank of Canada, like, that's the basic math, inflation stays high, they need to tame it. The harder that it is to get it down, the more aggressive they're willing to be with raising rates. So if we see a drastic raising of rates, we see prices drop. On the other hand, if you see that things are really like getting bad in the economy, we're not seeing inflation, we're seeing like deflation or something like that happens, right? Where the economy just stops. Which, one thing I want to add, like, to all this is you got to be careful with where you're getting your news from, like, because it'll be represented in the way that whoever is reporting it wants you to hear, right? So housing is like the number one news source right now. It gets the most clicks because everyone's scared, right? And fear usually gets a lot of attention. So you got to be careful. But for me personally, I have all this data. I see the recent sales. I know my market, so I can see the ground level, which is very important. So we can see what's actually happening. But I guess the point is like, you just got to see what's going to happen in terms of like the market or the overall economy improving. And then if we see like things get really bad in the economy, they might cut rates, basically, because at that point we'll probably enter a recession where the economy is not growing, and that'll have to be reported as that. Some people are saying we're already in a recession because we're seeing negative GDP. A lot of industries are being hit, but I mean, no one's really reporting that as much as they are about like housing being on like fire and prices still being too high. But as you can see, like, from now, like even September, all the way, if you go to the beginning of 2021, right? So you can say we're going to hit almost like January 2024, the price is going to be pretty much here. So we're going to be in an economy probably where the price technically hasn't really changed. It's just gone up and come back down for the last 3 years. And I think that's a good thing, right? So that's what's actually happening. And if you look at the overall average of housing, like, you'll see it's about 5 to 7% in the greater Toronto area and surrounding areas over the last 30 years that prices go up. So if you take up everything where prices went up during COVID, like 20, 25%, but then they stayed flat for 3 to 4 years, it actually balances out. And that's probably what's going to happen, right? Beyond that, honestly, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that's what we have to kind of like look out for. That's the real I think real data we could really go off of is what's kind of happened in the averages, right? Um, and yeah, I'll just quickly show you some sales so you can kind of see what's happening right now in terms of, sorry. So these are just some sales within the last 14 days. So this one's great because a property like this, like just this past summer with a 50 by 150, 55 by 150 foot lot on the Hamilton Mountain, it was selling probably like close to 700,000, but now we're seeing this one for 660, right? It's not in bad shape, but it has a nice big lot. It's on a main road, but still, it's large, right? Like it's 1260 square feet. Most bungalows are about 1,000, right? So that kind of shows you kind of what's happening, like to some degree. Um, this property is on the west side of Hamilton. The flip, it looks like. I think I saw this one as well. Like this probably could have gone a little bit more before, but it sold very quickly. So this is what I mean. If you have like this sold in 4 days. So if you have the best product with the best value and it's in a good area like this, like it's going to sell quick. And they obviously got what they wanted, which is why they took the offer so quickly. Usually when people don't get the price they don't want, it'll sit longer, which is why we see properties sitting longer anyways. But yeah, another bungalow in Hamilton. So we'll check this out. This sold for 700K. This is one that was flipped with a non-legal basement. So property like this was selling north of 750K in just this past summer. Sold for 700. But that's what it is. Like that's what I mean. Like there is some changes, and we're probably going to see it kind of just reflect last year, and then beyond that, going into next year, really depends on what the news is, I guess, coming out of and the reports are for like CPI, inflation, and just the data and what we expect the Bank of Canada to kind of how do they want to approach it. But yeah, I thought it'd be interesting, right, to just look at it from this perspective. It's good to look at numbers sometimes, although I know it's not like as interesting as just getting like simple reports. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, and then I'll leave my contact info below as well if you want to talk about like your specific situation if you're in Hamilton or whatever your situation is. Again, if you're selling, I would say try to hold off, but just reach out to me if you have questions. If you're in Hamilton and your surrounding areas, and then if you're buying, honestly, that point November to February is like I think we'll see some great deals. So yeah, hopefully you guys got some value out of this.